today we're going to be offering a tremendous resource to many women who are really struggling with relationships of all types. We'll be addressing how to heal our relationships based on the teachings of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. And I know that you have said in your own words, what do we want? We want to feel less pain and more optimism, to be happy and to lead meaningful lives. And this all requires healthy relationships. It really does. And if we learn, share, and live his teachings, Rabbi Nachman gives us real practical tools to improve all of our relationships, our relationship with Hashem, our relationship with ourselves, and our relationship with each other. It's really amazing. And this is so profound and so true. And most women I know struggle with at least one, if not more, of these relationships in their lives. For some, it's with their husband. For others, it's with their children. And other women struggle in their relationships with their parents or their friends or even their coworkers. And some of them struggle with all of the above, which is really hard. So I want to start off with some perspective. Can you please share with us some of Rabbi Nachman's viewpoints on relationships and their important role that they play in our lives?
So Rebbe Nachman actually says that that in the Aleph Bet book, he says that our relationships is something we all want. We would rather not live than not have loving relationships with friends and families. That's how important it is and central it is. When we think of Rebbe Nachman, we don't necessarily think about this, but it was absolutely central to his worldview because he understood the confluence of all of those three areas of relationships that you mentioned and that I like to really focus on, which is our relationship with each other, of course, our relationship with Hashem, of course, but very profoundly our relationship with ourselves. We can't have one of that triumvirate missing and expect the pieces to fall into place. Now, the Rebbe also, he points out to us that we are all in throughout our relationships engaged in one form or another at one point in time or another of projection. Now, he doesn't use that word. That's a modern 20th century psychological term. But what it means that whatever's going on inside you, and it can be positive and it could be not so positive, that is what we are projecting onto the other person.
Yes.
And the other person becomes a mirror for us. And his great-grandfather, the Baal Shem Tov, spoke about this as well. And in order for us to have healthy relationships, we have to be able to project the positive because in truth, most people, most of the time project the negative. They may not admit it. They may not admit it to themselves. We have all done it. Vera, I'm sure you've done it.
Yes.
Okay, we have something going on. We think that person's cheap. We think that person's jealous. We think that person has an anger issue. But very often, if we look in the mirror, and again, make the time for Hisbodedus, we can figure out that this is related to something going on inside us. And Rebbe Nachman's most famous lesson on the topic of relationships, on the topic of what we see in other people is called a Zamra. And it's Likutei Moharan 282 for anyone who's interested. It's a foundational lesson in Breslov. And it's very much about training ourselves with our thoughts to look for the good in other people and in ourselves. There are two components to that. And it's so fascinating because he's not saying, look for the good in other people and positivize them. Don't say, oh, wow, you're such a generous person, and rush to tell the person you're such a generous person. He's not saying don't do that, but he's not saying do that. What he's saying is focus on changing your thoughts and your perception. And that's where real change occurs. Why? Because our thoughts are our most sublime faculty. They're our most heavenly, spiritual faculty. Okay, we have speech, we have action. These things are at various distances from the spiritual world, action more so than speech more so than thought. So when we look at other people and we use our powers of perception to see the good in them, everything changes. But I want to just very quickly give a caveat. We don't necessarily, and we won't necessarily always see an external change in the relationship. We may, very often we do, but not always. But that is not a sign that the change isn't important and the perception isn't important.